Hey guys, tonight we're going back in time. Not to the roar of battlefields or the grand halls of revolution, but to something far more quiet. Imagine yourself wrapped in velvet curtains, the air thick with coal smoke, and the sound of a ticking clock somewhere in the distance. Welcome to the daily grind of Queen Victoria. No scandal, no drama, just tea and routines and an empire quietly humming in the background while Her Majesty dealt with her corset. You probably won't survive this if you're looking for excitement. Honestly, her daily schedule is so steady, so perfectly uneventful that your eyelids may start drooping just from the sheer amount of teaspoons involved. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop a comment with your location and what time it is right now. I love seeing where in the world you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up early, painfully early. It's still dark outside, and the only light in the room is a dim glow from the flickering fireplace that someone snuck in and lit while you were still dead asleep. The curtains are heavy, brocade, probably embroidered with something ridiculous like thistles and unicorns, and you're in a four-poster bed that would look intimidating even in a cathedral. You don't get to stretch, you don't get to groan. There are people in the room already. Maids, attendants, possibly one poor soul who's here just to hold the chamber pot. Welcome to being Queen Victoria. It's 6:30 in the morning, and everything smells faintly of damp lace, coal dust, and starch. The temperature in Buckingham Palace, or Windsor depending on the week, is somewhere between mild frostbite and might survive with mittens. The windows are tall, but the light's too shy to come through yet. Even the sky seems reluctant to start this day. One of the dressers, possibly named Mildred or Bertha or something aggressively Victorian, leans in with a gentle whisper, "Your Majesty?" It's not a question, it's a warning. Time to face the world. You sit up slowly, in a cloud of wool blankets, embroidered linen, and the distinct sensation of knowing you'll be surrounded by people all day. Your joints creak. You're not even 40 yet, but somehow you feel about 72. That's royalty for you. There's no brushing your teeth at the sink. Instead, someone brings in a porcelain bowl and pitcher, and you splash cold water on your face while pretending you feel refreshed. They brush your hair for you, about 100 strokes, because even your grooming has a schedule. Another maid helps you into something modest, conservative, and heavily buttoned. Corset first, always the corset. And oh, the corset! It doesn't hug your body so much as negotiate with it. You breathe in and immediately regret it. But you're the monarch. You endure. The floorboards creak beneath you as you shuffle toward the velvet-lined screen. Behind it, someone is discreetly holding your drawers as if they're sacred relics and not just oversized bloomers. You lift one foot, then the other. Everything smells a little bit of lavender and despair.
Meanwhile, outside the palace walls, London is coughing itself awake, chimneys belching, horses clattering, fog clinging to gas lamps. But none of that matters in here. Inside your cocoon of privilege, the days start slow, ceremonial, and entirely insulated. Eventually, you're dressed. Not in anything flashy, of course. Your husband, Albert, likes modesty. You like black. Even though you're not mourning yet, you wear enough layers to look perpetually one funeral away from a dramatic faint. At around 7 a.m., you're escorted, yes, escorted, to your private morning sitting room. It's a place with too much furniture and not enough coziness. You sit at a table with legs so ornate they probably have titles. Everything around you looks expensive but feels cold. There's a teacup already waiting. A single footman whose expression suggests he may have swallowed his emotions in 1842 and never seen them again, pours your first cup of tea. It's weak, lukewarm, and somehow already slightly bitter. Perfect. Here's where things get thrilling. You read a letter. Just one. Maybe it's from a relative complaining about the opera in Vienna. Maybe it's from someone in Scotland asking you to rename a cow. You skim it with the same energy you give to embroidery, mild interest paired with deep royal boredom. Historians still argue whether Victoria truly enjoyed these early mornings or just endured them because she had no alternative. Either way, she never skipped them, which makes you wonder, how much of royalty is choice and how much is just relentless inherited scheduling? Outside, someone drops a coal scuttle and the clatter echoes like gunfire. You pretend not to hear it. You're too busy stirring your tea exactly 3 times clockwise. This is the exciting part of the day, after all. Your pug, yes, you've acquired one again this month, sits at your feet, snorting gently. You've named him something elaborate, like Sir Pippington von Bark. He wheezes at your ankles as if to say, just wait until the paperwork starts. You lean back in your stiff, high-backed chair, already aware that nothing today will surprise you. The schedule is sacred. That means no last-minute changes, no indulgent naps, and definitely no adventures. Across the room, a single candle flickers. One of the ladies in waiting sneezes into her glove and tries to make it look like a curtsy. You sigh. Day 100 of the same old routine. Your first meal is coming up, but don't get excited. It's just breakfast served in an adjoining room that's roughly the size of a train station and feels about as cozy. Still, you've made it this far. You've survived the waking, the dressing, the early tea, and the letter. The real monotony hasn't even started yet. There's a rumor, whispered among the footmen, that you once tried chocolate for breakfast. Once. Naturally, it caused a minor panic. Improper, they said. Unseemly, they warned. So now it's always the same tea, the same toast, the same careful spoonful of marmalade that tastes like boiled sunshine and disappointment. Still, you sit there, the room slowly warming with each passing minute, and you let yourself settle into the inertia of royal life. There is no need to hurry. There is only duty, formality, and possibly another teacup. And yes, you will do this again tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that, because that is monarchy. Not fireworks, not declarations, just mornings like this, again and again, until history forgets the number of spoons and remembers only the crown.
Breakfast isn't something you eat. It's something you endure, like a social formality wrapped in dry toast. You've shuffled your way to the breakfast room now, after being gently escorted by a lady-in-waiting who walks exactly 1 pace behind you, as if stepping ahead would cause the entire monarchy to collapse in on itself. The breakfast room is echoey, lined with large windows that refuse to let in much light thanks to the eternal gray of the London morning. It's not gloomy, exactly. It's just hushed and cold, like a church that hasn't seen a congregation in years. Your seat is, of course, already pulled out for you. The table stretches into the distance like something out of a banquet scene. But today, like most days, you are the only person sitting at it. Everything is set with alarming precision. Napkin folded into a bishop's mitre, butter knife pointing at precisely 7 o'clock, salt and pepper in matching ivory pots that no one will actually use. There are enough forks to stage a coup.
You sit down in complete silence. One maid adjusts your napkin with delicate terror, as if your disapproval might result in exile to the Orkneys. Then another footman appears, somewhere between the ages of 12 and timeless, with a tray containing exactly what you already know will be there: a soft-boiled egg, half a grapefruit that you won't touch, and a pot of tea that smells faintly like damp hedges. You don't speak. No one does. That's part of the ritual. The only sound is the soft clink of your spoon against porcelain as you stir your tea, again, clockwise, always clockwise, because somewhere in a long-forgotten etiquette book it says counterclockwise is French. The tea is warm, not hot, black, lightly steeped, probably Assam, not strong enough to wake you, not weak enough to offend, just the right level of boring. Historians still argue whether Victoria actually liked her tea this tepid, or whether generations of servants simply assumed she did and were too terrified to ask. The egg, when you tap it, cracks obediently. The yolk doesn't spill because, of course it doesn't. Everything here behaves, even the poultry. You eat in slow, mechanical bites, chewing just enough to maintain the illusion of enthusiasm. Occasionally, you glance at the window, but there's not much to see, just fog rolling in like an indifferent ghost. Your pug, Sir Pippington von Bark, is not allowed in the dining room, but you can hear him whimpering just outside the door. Somewhere, a maid is bribing him with a biscuit to keep him from howling. At one point, the footman nearest to you suppresses a cough so violently you think he might implode. You consider asking if he's all right, but decide against it. Compassion is for the afternoon block. This is not just breakfast. This is morning theater. Every napkin fold, every tea pour, every perfectly buttered crumpet exists to say, all is calm. The empire is under control. No one is using the wrong spoon. But the truth is, you're bored. Deeply, royally, soul-wearily bored. You think about Albert, still asleep, no doubt. He's not a breakfast person, or a morning person, or really a sitting silently at a 14-foot table with cold toast person. You envy him a little, snoring away in blissful ignorance while you attempt to pretend this grapefruit is worth the effort.
A silver-domed tray is placed near you, lifted with a flourish. Poached kippers. You sigh. Who invented poached fish for breakfast, and why? Historians still debate whether it was a culinary preference or a subtle act of upper-class masochism. Either way, it's here now, and you're expected to eat at least 2 bites. The kippers steam softly in your plate, like a passive-aggressive reminder that this is your life now. You poke at them with a fork shaped like a tiny trident, wondering if they were happier in the sea. One of the younger servants accidentally breathes too loudly and receives the side eye of doom from the butler, who has perfected the art of silent scolding. You do not react. You are the monarch. You pretend you don't hear the low-key panic fluttering beneath the starched uniforms around you. You finish your egg, sip more tea, half-heartedly tear off a corner of toast and dip it into what's left of your yolk. It's all ritual, none of it joy. Still, there's a strange comfort in it, a kind of daily scaffolding. Everything in place, nothing unexpected. You like that. You need that, especially after the chaos of your early reign, the constant fear of assassination, the arguments with Parliament, the dizzying anxiety of motherhood. Compared to that, this quiet meal, performed like a sacred dance, is the only kind of peace you're afforded. There's an old story that floats through your mind. Some guest once asked why you had 12 different kinds of knives at the breakfast table, and apparently you replied deadpan, Because there are 12 different kinds of threats in the world, Mr. Gladstone. You're not sure if you ever said that, but it makes you smile just slightly now as you reach for another slice of tragically unripe melon. One of the ladies in waiting stands awkwardly to the side, pretending to read a newspaper that she's definitely already read 3 times. She's waiting for your cue, your signal that breakfast is complete. And finally, you give it. The tiniest nod, the slow, graceful rise from your chair. Someone pulls it back as if you might explode from contact with wood. You murmur something nearly inaudible, a thank you, perhaps, or just a sigh shaped like a word. The entire room exhales as you leave. You're now fully fueled by 1 egg, 1 toast slice, a cup and a half of mediocre tea, and the crushing weight of protocol. And yet, somehow, you feel full. Not with food, with formality. You've completed step 1 of your daily performance. Now it's on to the real work. Sitting in another room, nodding at papers you won't remember, and pretending that everything you're signing won't eventually become someone else's doctoral thesis. As you step back into the corridor, the carpet muffles your footsteps. Everything smells of old stone and polish. A painting of your great-uncle George III stares down at you with wild, unblinking eyes. You resist the urge to whisper, "Morning, George," like you do most days. You've got standards to maintain. Outside, the fog has lifted just enough to suggest the sun might eventually rise. But it doesn't matter. In here, everything runs on candlelight and tradition. And breakfast is already forgotten. Until tomorrow, when you'll eat it all again.
You make your way down another echoing corridor, the kind lined with oil portraits whose eyes seem to follow you, not out of malice, but mild curiosity. "What's she off to now?" they seem to ask. "Signing papers again? How daring." You don't answer. You're too busy preparing your expression for what's next, the daily paperwork. It's not glamorous. In fact, it's the very opposite of glamorous. But it's important. At least, that's what they keep telling you. You enter the morning room, a misleading name since you'll be in here well into the afternoon. It's a space lined with velvet drapes, elaborate clocks, and polished tables covered in leather blotters and thick stacks of official-looking paper. Everything smells like ink, beeswax, and the distinct mustiness of ancient protocol. You take your place at a desk so large it could double as a lifeboat. A private secretary is already waiting, standing at attention like a particularly overqualified coat rack, holding a stack of dispatch boxes. Red leather, gold trim, the royal inbox, and it's full again. 1 box at a time, he opens the lid and begins to read aloud. You listen, or at least you pretend to. Some days you do care. On others, it's just a stream of dates, names, and words like appropriations and colonial liaisons that float past you like dust motes. Today's top entry, a petition from a small town in Wales requesting permission to erect a statue of you. Another one. You nod faintly, the universal royal signal for fine as long as it doesn't have a mustache. Then come military reports, boring, agricultural yields, even more boring. An update from Canada, something about logging disputes. You blink slowly, you sign. Your signature, even at this point, is still a bit of a production. Not just Victoria, oh no, it's Victoria R for Regina, Queen. And those 2 letters carry the weight of an entire empire. You press the pen down with just enough pressure to make it look deliberate. Flourish slightly, release. Done. But the box isn't empty. Not even close. Historians still argue whether you truly read every document put before you, or if you simply mastered the art of looking extremely attentive while mentally rearranging your brooches. Either way, it works. No one ever questions you. Not anymore. Sir Pippington von Bark has followed you in because someone forgot to shut the door all the way. He huffs from the corner, curled up on an embroidered footstool, as if he too is weighed down by governance. The private secretary continues. There's a letter from the Prime Minister. You're on your third one this decade. They blur together after a while. White-haired men with monocles and worried eyebrows. This one, Lord Melbourne, has the decency to write in neat cursive. You approve something about funding for a new naval shipyard. You think. You nod again. At one point, you're handed a letter from a concerned citizen, written in scratchy, nervous ink, begging the Queen to intervene in a rent dispute. You purse your lips. There's nothing you can do. You know it. They know it. But they write to you anyway, as if your name on an envelope might chase poverty out of their tenement.
You hand it back. "Thank you," you murmur, even though you're not sure why. Maybe it's for the letter. Maybe it's for the hope it carries. There's a whisper of lace as a lady-in-waiting glides in with more tea. This one's a bit stronger, probably Ceylon. You sip. It tastes like productivity, or at least like something to do with your hands. The stack of documents continues. One pertains to India, your distant, dazzling, overwhelming jewel. You read a short memo on trade tariffs and think of how many people that line of text might affect. Thousands? Millions? But it's phrased in such dry, bureaucratic terms that it almost doesn't feel real, like you're signing off on fiction. You lean back. Your corset pinches. The clock chimes 10, each clang echoing through the marble halls like a reminder that time here doesn't rush, it drips. The private secretary clears his throat and brings up an invitation to a charity function, or maybe it's a hospital opening. You can't tell anymore. All public events blend into one long line of awkward handshakes, badly tuned orchestras, and the overwhelming smell of boiled cabbage. You nod. He marks it in his ledger. You'll go, or you'll send one of your daughters, maybe Helena. She likes those sorts of things, or at least she's good at pretending she does. You sign another document, and another. At some point, the seal is brought out, your actual royal seal. It's kept under lock and key, like a sacred artifact. Pressed into warm wax, it transforms every letter from a piece of paper into an edict. You try not to think too hard about that. There's something odd in the next dispatch. A botanical report from Kew Gardens detailing the success of a newly imported orchid species. You raise your eyebrows. This, at least, is mildly interesting. The flower has a Latin name that sounds vaguely like a sneeze, but you murmur a small, "How charming," and make a mental note to request a cutting for the conservatory. Every now and then, a genuinely strange request appears, one from a nobleman in Devon asking permission to duel a neighbor. You frown. "Is dueling not quite out of fashion?" you ask softly. The secretary blushes. "It is, Your Majesty, quite." You scroll "denied" with the tip of your pen. It's nearing midday now, and the paperwork is thinning. A few final signatures, a last scan of diplomatic memos, something about a visit from the Russian ambassador. You'll need to prepare for that. Perhaps wear the brooch Albert gave you, the one with the sapphire, the one that catches light like a drop of moonlight. As you close the final box, there's a pause. A silence that lingers in the air like incense. The private secretary bows slightly. "That's all for today, ma'am." You nod, slowly. "Thank you, Mr. Ponsonby." And with that, the ritual ends. The pens are cleaned, the wax cooled, the seals locked away. The Queen has done her paperwork.
You stand, back slightly stiff, joints gently protesting. You've signed off on laws, reviewed treaties and approved statutes, and yet somehow you feel as if you've simply rearranged furniture in a very large, very old house. Still, this is what being monarch means, not ruling, reigning, holding still while everything else moves around you. You walk slowly back into the corridor, trailing the scent of ink and roses. You pass by a window and glance out. The fog is gone now, replaced by thin, silvery sunlight. For a moment you think about stepping outside, breathing in fresh air, feeling grass under your feet. But no. It's nearly time for the midday walk, and that, like everything else, must happen exactly on schedule. You continue walking. Another painting stares down at you. This one's of Queen Elizabeth I. She looks regal, terrifying, brilliant. You wonder if she ever had to sit through 3 hours of trade reports without falling asleep. Sir Pippington trots behind you, tail wagging like a small, sleepy metronome. You allow yourself the smallest of smiles. Just another day in the most powerful empire on earth. And so far, you've only had tea and signed 17 documents.
The sound your boots make as they cross the marble vestibule is curiously satisfying, like little clacks of authority softened by rug fringe and time. You're not alone. You're never alone. 2 ladies in waiting trail you like pastel shadows, and behind them a footman whose primary function seems to be carrying an umbrella for weather that hasn't arrived yet. This is your midday constitutional, the sacred royal walk. Not a stroll, not a meander, a constitutional, because it sounds nobler, more medicinal, less like you're trying to kill time before luncheon. You descend the wide stone steps of Windsor Castle with as much majesty as your corseted spine allows. Outside, the sky is finally doing its job and behaving like a painting. Blue, brushed with gentle clouds, sun dappling across gravel paths and flower beds that cost more than a row of cottages. The gardens stretch out before you like a polite, manicured fantasy. Roses and foxgloves arranged with painful precision. Shrubs clipped into the vague shapes of lions and unicorns. Symbols of royalty carved into shrubbery, as if topiary could enforce dominion. You begin to walk. The pace is measured, even, queenly. You do not stroll. You glide. A gardener pretends not to look up as you pass. He's been told not to, but you catch him sneaking a glance. His cap nearly falls off from the speed at which he bows. You do not respond. It's not rudeness, it's just the performance. Everyone has their part. Birds chirp. Somewhere, a fountain gurgles. A bee bumbles too close to your bonnet, and a lady-in-waiting swats it away with her fan in a single, silent motion. You murmur a thank you. She beams as if knighted. You come to a small stone bench near the edge of the rose garden. It's perfectly placed, angled to catch the morning sun, but shaded just enough to keep your skin from freckling. You sit. The others stop precisely behind you, like chess pieces awaiting your next move. From here, you can see the distant edge of the grounds, the rolling green that seems to stretch forever. Somewhere beyond that, the Thames curves like a ribbon dropped by a careless god. You sit in silence. Sir Pippington finds a patch of grass to snort in and sneezes dramatically. You pretend not to notice, but secretly enjoy it. He's the only creature in this world allowed to be completely, delightfully undignified around you. You hear a soft rustle, someone approaching.
It's a stable boy, bringing word that your favorite pony, Flora, has been walked and brushed and is ready for a ride, should your majesty desire it. You do not desire it. You've already had enough movement for now. You send back a gentle reply, tomorrow, perhaps. The boy nods like you've just spared his life. Maybe you have. Historians still debate whether Victoria genuinely enjoyed these midday walks or whether they were simply another box to tick, another ritual of the royal day. What's certain is that she never skipped them. Not once. Not even in rain. There's a rustling in the hydrangeas. A squirrel bursts out dramatically, tail high, like a scandalized aristocrat. You watch it scamper away, briefly entertained.
You sit a while longer, letting your eyes go soft. The sun warms your lap. The hem of your dress flutters slightly in the breeze. A lady in waiting coughs behind you, the polite kind of cough that says, "Should we begin walking again, ma'am?" You nod slightly, and the parade resumes. As you walk, you think, not about politics or treaties or the endless boxes of correspondence, but about the sheer, surreal quiet of it all. To be queen is to be watched, always, but also to be strangely apart. No one walks with you, they walk behind you, even your shadow travels alone. You pass a marble statue of Queen Charlotte. Her face is chipped, just slightly, from a hard winter a few years back. You glance at her frozen expression and wonder if she ever found these walks as stifling as you sometimes do. Probably, but she had better posture. The gravel path leads toward the orangery, a warm glass and brick building filled with potted citrus trees. You've always liked the orangery. The smell alone is worth the visit. Sweet, sharp, alive. Inside, the air shifts. It's warmer, damp with humidity and leaf scent. The trees are in bloom. Tiny green oranges hang like ornaments. You walk slowly among them, running a gloved finger across one of the broad leaves. It curls shyly at your touch. This is your empire too, not just the continents and colonies, but these small, silent dominions of leaf and glass and lemon. One of the gardeners offers you a folded note. It's from one of your daughters, requesting a few moments of your time later in the day. You fold it carefully, tuck it into your sleeve. You'll decide later if you're in the mood for mothering. You exit the orangery and continue your loop, this time toward the aviary. It's newly refurbished and full of exotic birds sent as gifts from various governors and viceroys trying to curry favor. The parrots shriek when they see you. One attempts a wobbly "Victoria," and your face twitches at the corners. Not a smile, just a near one. "Very good," you murmur, and the bird bows, or maybe it just loses balance. Either way, you take it as respect. There's a peacock strutting nearby, tail fully fanned. It's breathtaking, but you've seen it before, many times. You begin to suspect it only performs when you're near, another creature that's learned the rules of royal performance. You continue your walk back toward the main gardens, the ones visible from the royal apartments. There, a hedge maze winds in quiet loops, and a fountain shaped like Poseidon looks slightly surprised to be here. As you pass, you catch sight of a small child, probably a noble's son, snuck into the gardens for fresh air. He freezes at the sight of you, then bows, deeply, hat in hand, legs trembling. You stop, just for a moment, then give him a very small wave. His face lights up like he's just been knighted. Somewhere behind you, one of your ladies in waiting lets out a quiet "ah" before catching herself.
You pretend not to notice. Finally, you reach the steps again. The loop is complete. Your walk, your midday moment of near solitude, is over. As you climb the stairs, Sir Pippington lets out a snore that echoes up the stone walls. He's slept through most of it, of course, but somehow that feels right. You'd rather a dog sleep peacefully at your side than a dozen ministers whispering urgently in your ear. You return to the cool shadow of the corridor, the hush of marble and history waiting to resume its daily script. The bell for luncheon will ring soon. Time to refresh, recorset, and sit through another meal so formal it makes breakfast look like a tavern brawl. But for now, you walk, slowly, gracefully, unapologetically alone. The bell tolls just as you reach the second landing, a long, slow chime that echoes like someone announcing, "Her Majesty may now chew." You sigh inwardly. Luncheon, again. You've only just stopped tasting your second cup of tea, and now the next performance begins. You glide toward the dining room, a space so elaborately decorated it feels like you're about to dine inside a Fabergé egg. The ceilings are tall, absurdly tall really, and covered in painted cherubs that always seem to be judging your choice of bread roll. The walls glimmer with gold leaf, and the table, endless, set for 20, even if there will only be 6 today. Space, after all, is status. Your chair is already drawn. You don't sit, you descend into it. A footman places your napkin across your lap with a flourish so graceful you wonder if he used to be a magician. Seated nearby, a carefully curated collection of family, advisors, and obligatory nobility. Some of your children, depending on the day, maybe Princess Alice, endlessly curious and always slightly too modern for comfort, or Bertie, Edward, technically, the heir who has your eyes and your frustration. He is here today, fiddling with his cutlery as though it might solve the mystery of adulthood. They all rise when you do, sit when you do, bite when you do. This isn't a meal, it's choreography. The soup arrives, thin, clear, and suspiciously free of flavor. You sip it delicately, more out of tradition than desire. Victorian cuisine is many things, but exciting isn't one of them. The main course follows, paraded in by liveried servants as if it's won an award. Roast beef, boiled potatoes, and some unfortunate cabbage that's been cooked within an inch of its soul. You've had this exact meal 17 times this month, maybe more. You chew dutifully. There's small talk, though no one dares call it that. Your guests say things like, "The Duchess of Argyle's garden party was delightful, wasn't it? And did you hear about Lord something's mishap with the pheasant?" You nod. You murmur. You look vaguely amused. This is royal lunch, theatre with silverware. Someone brings up the latest parliamentary vote. You raise one eyebrow. Not enough to be confrontational, just enough to say, "Are we really doing this over cabbage?" They change the subject. Sir Pippington, allowed under the table, a privilege no human enjoys, lets out a tiny burp. You pretend not to hear it, but you nudge him gently with the toe of your boot. Just a reminder of decorum. He responds with a snuffle and goes back to dreaming about pheasants and titles. The conversation turns to the opera, or maybe the ballet, some cultural event you were supposed to enjoy last week but barely stayed awake through. You smile politely and say something vague like, "The set design was particularly striking."
One of your guests, probably the Duke of something, starts recounting a hunting trip in excruciating detail. You wonder, as he describes a goose that simply refused to be shot, whether it's acceptable to imagine you are somewhere else entirely.
perhaps on a beach, or at least in a quieter dining room. Historians still argue whether Queen Victoria actually enjoyed these daily luncheons or simply tolerated them as another box in the royal schedule. They tend to lean toward tolerated. After all, you've documented how draining it is to perform royal domesticity on demand. At some point, dessert arrives. A wobbly pink thing that might be gelatin or possibly some sort of jam-based dare. You poke it with your spoon. It trembles unconvincingly. The footmen refill wine glasses. You rarely drink more than a sip, but you raise the glass anyway, eyes scanning the room like a tired commander surveying a polite battlefield. Bertie tries to tell a joke. It's not very good, but you allow yourself a chuckle, enough to encourage him, but not so much that he'll think he's ready to host a salon. A lady-in-waiting leans close to whisper that a bouquet of white roses arrived from Balmoral. No note. Probably from one of the staff there, a quiet gesture of loyalty. You nod and say you'll have them placed in the small drawing room. White roses mean something to you. Still, even now. You're not entirely here at this lunch. Part of you never is. Part of you is always listening for the distant echo of another bell, the one that ends this polite ordeal and lets you retreat. You look around the table. Some faces are familiar, some forgettable, all of them careful, smiling just enough, never leaning too far in, never daring to speak first unless invited. This is the cost of power. No one around you is ever quite at ease, even family. You glance toward Bertie again. His jacket is slightly wrinkled. He hasn't mastered the royal stare yet, but he's trying. You wonder if he realizes how heavy the crown is before it even touches your head. The plates are cleared. The table is reset. A final course of fruit and nuts appears, and with it a kind of collective sigh. The end is near. You peel an orange with surprising skill. Your fingers know this routine too well. Across the table, Princess Alice is sketching something on her napkin with the end of a fork. She pretends not to notice you watching. She's always had a spark, a kind of fire that both pleases and worries you. One day she'll want to do more than walk gardens and host dignitaries. She'll want to act, to change things, to speak. And the world might not be ready, but she will be. The conversation lulls, that peculiar silence falls, the one that hovers just before permission to leave is granted. You dab your lips, fold your napkin, rise. So does everyone else. Luncheon, like a minor opera, is complete. The cast disperses. The footmen sweep in, collecting dishes and resetting cutlery as if it had all been a rehearsal for tomorrow. You step into the corridor. A gust of cooler air greets you. Behind you, muffled voices murmur with the relief of release. You keep walking. The schedule beckons, and next, letters. Not the official kind. Those came in dispatch boxes. These are personal, sometimes too personal, sometimes empty, but all of them addressed to you. Queen, mother, widow, monarch. The letter hour waits. You return to your sitting room, the only space in the castle where things are allowed to feel vaguely human. The air smells faintly of roses and paper. Everything is padded, the chairs, the footstools, even the conversation, if there were anyone around to have it with. You lower yourself into your armchair, not the stiff, formal kind,
but the one with a cushion so well worn it almost sighs beneath you. A lady in waiting places the silver letter tray on your lap, as if it contains treasure instead of, well, more of everything. The letters are stacked like a pastry tower, folded with care, wax-sealed, scented, some scrawled with the ink of children, some with the practiced loops of lords and duchesses. And of course, the ministers, always the ministers, whose handwriting is so dry it practically sheds dust. You begin at the top. The first is from your daughter, Helena, recently married, now convinced her life is a garden party, with marital arguments sprinkled in like forget-me-nots. She writes about curtains and a dog, and whether she may visit next week. You nod slightly, as though her voice echoes softly in the room. "Yes, my dear," you whisper, not meaning for anyone to hear it. The next letter is from your Prime Minister. A familiar name, another weekly update full of words that walk on eggshells. He tells you everything and nothing at once. He ends with, "Your devoted servant." You roll your eyes a little. You've outlived 5 of his predecessors. You'll likely outlive him too. As you open the third letter, this one from someone you don't immediately recognize, you catch the edge of the envelope with your glove and sigh. The small things are always the hardest in gloves. 1,000 buttons, but none that help with dexterity. Inside, a child's drawing, a sun with a crown, and below it what must be you, slightly cross-eyed, wearing what looks like a wedding cake on your head. You smile in spite of yourself. There's a note, "To Her Majesty," from Annie, age 6. "I saw you once on a train." That one you set aside. You always set those aside. They remind you of something uncomplicated, something quiet. Historians still argue whether you personally answered your letters or if your secretaries did all the lifting. The truth? Both. You're not above delegation, but some missives, they demand your hand. The next envelope smells of lavender. You recognize the penmanship immediately. It's from your daughter Louise, the artist. She's never written a dull sentence in her life. This one begins, "Dearest Mama, I have painted something outrageous, and I hope you hate it." You chuckle. You won't hate it. You rarely hate anything Louise does. She has your fire, after all, just without the throne. The tray is only half empty. You shift slightly, brush a crumb off your skirt that probably arrived from nowhere, and reach for the next. It's from a widow in Yorkshire. She's lost her husband and her eldest son, and now her home is under threat. She writes not for pity, but for permission to move into a worker's cottage on your estate. You pause.
A moment of stillness. You call for your lady-in-waiting. "Make a note," you say. "We'll see what can be done for her." Your voice is steady, but inside something stirs. You remember the ache of loss, of silence, of looking at a room and seeing the shape of someone who isn't there anymore. You move on, though the widow's words follow you for several letters. Next, a missive from Balmoral Castle. The estate manager has sent a new list of repairs, roof tiles, chimneys, a list so long it needs 2 sheets. You nod again, remembering the drafts in the corridors there, the way the Scottish wind seemed to talk in doorways. "Approve," you murmur. Sir Pippington lets out a groan from beneath the side table. You glance at him. He's dreaming again. His paw twitches. You imagine he's chasing something. Rabbits? Or perhaps a scone. You set another letter aside, then another. Some bring joy, some bring burdens, Some simply fill the room with the hum of humanity. And then you reach the envelope, the one you always save until last. You recognize the handwriting instantly, firm, slanted, no flourishes, just truth on a page. You open it slowly, savoring the sound of tearing paper, the way the wax breaks cleanly. It's from John Brown. Even in death, his voice lives in these letters. You have every one he ever wrote. This one is old, reread many times, tucked into a stack you revisit like holy scripture. You don't read it again now, you just hold it. Some say he was only your servant, others say more. Historians still argue whether you loved him, needed him, or simply leaned on him because no one else would ever speak plainly to you again. Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe the truth is in the way you still carry his letter when the room grows too quiet. The tray is nearly empty now. Just one more envelope. Pale blue, embossed, official. You sigh. You know what it is. An invitation to a diplomatic dinner next month with people whose names you'll forget and food that will taste like politely salted air. You set it aside. Later, you say to no one. You ring a small bell. A maid enters. She knows the rhythm by now. The used letters will be burned or filed depending on your markings. The child's drawing will be framed and hidden behind a stack of serious portraits. John's letter will be returned to its place, beneath the false bottom drawer of your writing desk, where sentiment and secrecy live together in the dark. There's a knock, another footman, another tray. This time, reply drafts. Your secretaries have prepared answers based on your notes. You review them quickly. A correction here, a word softened there, a scrawl in the margin. Too formal. She's lost her son, not applied for a bank loan. You sign 3 of them yourself. The rest you initial. Queen, after all, is a title. But Victoria, she still writes. The shadows in the room have shifted. Afternoon has slid toward evening, and the sun hangs lower now, brushing across the carpet in honeyed streaks. You lean back for a moment. Let your eyes rest. Let the soft rustle of papers become a lullaby. The letters are done. The day presses onward, and soon, so must you.
You rise again, always rising. Sitting is never quite rest in a royal body, just a pause between performances. The clock ticks a little louder now, not because it has grown bolder, but because the castle is quieting. The walls seem to exhale in the afternoon light. It's time for the promenade. You walk toward the outer grounds, layers of fabric whispering at your ankles. Somewhere, someone is already unbolting the palace doors. They do it slowly, reverently, as if the hinges themselves are loyal subjects. Outside, the air is crisp and reluctant, not quite warm, not quite cold. English, in other words. You step out beneath a sky so pale it almost vanishes against the white stone of the palace facade. There's a path prepared, raked, smoothed, cleared of even the thought of a pebble. And just beside it, your pony carriage waits. The carriage itself is absurdly small by royal standards, like a plaything for a duchess's child. But it suits the hour, modest, contained, a rolling bubble of routine. You step in. The driver, a sturdy, stone-faced man who hasn't changed expression since the Crimean War, clicks his tongue and the ponies begin to move.
Small hooves clip the gravel with perfect rhythm. The world begins to roll by at walking speed, which, if you're being honest, is about as fast as you care to move these days. Gardens unfold on either side, roses like wallpaper, lawns as smooth as billiards tables, trees trained into arches, as if even nature has to learn etiquette around you. A breeze brushes your cheek, smells faintly of earth, grass, the faintest whiff of manure. The kingdom, in other words, in all its fragrances. Sir Pippington has joined you, of course. He rides in the carriage like a furry diplomat. Every so often, he perks his ears at a bird or a leaf, then promptly decides it's beneath his station. You pass a hedge maze. Once, your children used to play there, giggling like court jesters on too much jam. You remember Bertie getting stuck once, shouting that the maze had tricked him and that he required military intervention. You didn't send the army, just a footman with a long stick. These gardens have held generations of secrets. A quiet first kiss behind the apple tree, tears behind the yew hedge, 1,000 footsteps by people who knew they would never truly own this place, only visit it under the shadow of your rule. You glance up. A flock of birds scatters overhead in a flurry of wings and shared decisions. You wonder what it would be like to change direction that easily, to just go. The carriage loops around a small pond. Ducks trail across the surface like lazy commas in a sentence that never quite ends. You used to feed them, now you just watch.
There's a bench near the edge. You signal. The carriage stops. Your lady-in-waiting appears, as if conjured by intention, and helps you down. Your joints grumble slightly, less royal, more mortal. You sit. The bench is cool. The pond ripples, and for a moment the world forgets your crown. You're just a woman on a bench, watching ducks argue about breadcrumbs. You pluck a folded note from your pocket, a poem someone sent you last week. Not very good, something about daffodils and destiny. But you reread it anyway. The rhythm is soothing. Even mediocre verse has its place in the quiet. Behind you, footsteps. 2 ladies-in-waiting approach, speaking in low voices. You don't turn around, but you know the rhythm. They're debating something, whether your shawl was too light this morning perhaps, or whether to request new gloves for the christening next month. Life at court is full of tiny catastrophes. You let the voices fade into the breeze. A memory arrives, not one you asked for. You're younger, so much younger, walking beside Albert, before the wait, before the morning. He's telling you something about stars. You're pretending to listen, mostly because of the way his mouth moves when he's explaining things. The world felt possible then. Now it feels like a calendar. Still, the pond is calm. The trees lean in, as if curious, and the air, for once, doesn't ask anything of you. But the schedule waits. You rise once more. A footman appears before you even finish standing. You've trained the world well. Back in the carriage, the loop completes. The palace looms again, familiar and enormous, like a promise you made years ago and now have to keep every day. You're back inside before you realize it. The air is warmer, scented with polish and flowers and power. Your shawl is removed, your gloves replaced, and somewhere in the castle, the next moment is already being prepared. You still have one more daily ritual before dinner. You make your way down the long corridor lined with portraits. They stare as you pass. Every ancestor, every mistake, every legacy with a wig. One of them looks uncannily like a potato in lace. You've never said so aloud,
not even to Albert, but you think it every time. At the end of the corridor, a quiet door. Inside, the blue room. No one comes in here unless summoned. This is where you write your journal. Every evening, without fail, since you were 13. It's not optional. It's not therapeutic. It's not even for you, really. It's the archive, the proof, the pulse of the crown. You sit at the writing desk. The pen is already uncapped, the ink already stirred. Someone has left a tiny plate with a biscuit you will never eat, but always appreciate. You begin. Today, luncheon with the family. Weather fair. Bertie continues to fidget. A letter from Helena. The words are short, clipped. It isn't poetry, it's record. One day, someone will read these. Maybe, maybe not. But the act matters more than the audience. You keep writing. Promenade as usual. Gardens well tended. A goose honked at Sir Pippington, who replied in kind. You pause. Look up. For a moment, the castle is utterly still. Even the air seems to wait. You glance at the clock. It ticks, like it always does. Dutiful, unstoppable. You finish the entry. Then close the book with a quiet sigh and stand, because the bell will ring soon, and then it's time to dress for dinner.
The bell chimes softly, 3 resonant notes that float through the palace like a polite suggestion rather than a command. But for you, it's more than a suggestion. It's the turning of another invisible page in your daily script. Dinner dressing begins. You rise from the writing desk and walk slowly toward your wardrobe chamber, accompanied now by 2 ladies-in-waiting and 1 silent maid who appears to glide rather than step. They orbit around you with quiet familiarity, like moons attending their planet. Inside the dressing room, the air is cooler, faintly floral, tinged with starch and silk. The lighting is always precise here, never harsh, never dim, just enough to reveal what must be smoothed, fastened, or, on daring days, replaced entirely. The evening gown has already been chosen. It rests like a waiting ghost upon a velvet-cushioned mannequin, deep plum tonight. Modest neckline, long sleeves, a tiny netting of lace at the wrist, elegance as protocol. You will look regal. You will feel something close to velvet-wrapped fatigue. But first, the underpinnings. You hold out your arms. Layers are peeled and replaced. The soft rustle of petticoats, the subtle creak of corset laces being drawn just a breath tighter. You've worn some form of whalebone cage every day since you were a teenager. It's like dressing inside a memory, one stitched with posture, propriety, and the weight of unspoken expectations. You make a small sound, a sigh, a groan, one of the 2, but no one says anything. They never do when you make that sound. The corset is fastened. You raise your arms again. Now the gown. It slips over your frame with the quiet grace of something well practiced. Hands smooth the fabric. A maid fusses at your hem with almost religious devotion. You don't look in the mirror. You never do before dinner. It's not about beauty. It's about preparedness. A necklace is clasped, modest pearls, a gift from Albert long ago. You could wear something grander, but that would feel like shouting in a library. Pearls, though, they whisper appropriately. Your hair is adjusted. One curl refuses to cooperate. It always has. You consider naming it. A light dusting of powder, just enough to even out the day. You raise an eyebrow slightly at the rouge brush, and your maid immediately retreats. You're not some painted duchess at a ball. You're the queen, a tired queen,
a consistent one. And finally, the fan. You choose the ivory one with gold inlay. It doesn't do much against the heat, but it gives your hands something to do when conversation gets tedious, which is often. You're ready. Almost. A footman appears. He hands you a small velvet envelope. It contains tonight's dinner seating chart. You skim it with the speed of someone who already knows it will be frustrating. Next to you, the German ambassador. Again. You suppose it's fitting, you're half German yourself, but the man has the personality of lukewarm gravy. Opposite, Bertie, of course, probably already practicing his charm and forgetting which fork to use. 2 places down, the Archbishop of Canterbury. You sigh. Every time he speaks, it feels like a sermon trying to escape through molasses. You fold the card and tuck it into your sleeve. Then, with a subtle nod, you begin walking toward the grand dining hall. The corridors are hushed but alert. A butler gives a small bow as you pass. Another footman adjusts a candelabra mid-flicker. Nothing is ever truly still in this palace, just a performance paused between acts. The doors to the dining hall are already open. The light spills out like golden syrup. Candles glow from chandeliers so large they could crush a small horse. The table stretches far too long for real conversation. It's not built for intimacy, it's built for display, for dominance by cutlery. You enter. Everyone stands. The rustle of silk, the scrape of chairs, the delicate thuds of pride being momentarily set aside. You walk the length of the room, slowly, not because you're tired, though you are, but because that's the pace of power. Your steps echo just enough to make people remember who they're looking at. You take your seat. The others follow. Dinner begins. Soup, of course. Always some variety of creamy nothingness, elegantly contained in porcelain you could probably auction for a small yacht. You raise your spoon. Sip. Taste is irrelevant. Texture is fine. Temperature is more important. It's lukewarm, just like the conversation. The German ambassador leans in, begins a story about railways. Again. You nod in polite intervals, interjecting with royal sounds. Indeed? Quite. Bertie interjects from across the table, a joke about hunting dogs. Everyone laughs a little too hard. You raise an eyebrow. He is trying. You grant him that. But charm cannot replace consistency, and you've seen too many heirs fail to deliver on the promises of their smiles. Still, you watch him. He gestures with his fork. His laugh is generous. His wife, Alexandra, beams beside him, wearing a dress so glittering it might blind a weaker monarch. You nod at her. She curtsies slightly, despite being seated. Course 2 arrives. Fish. You do not love fish, but it appears frequently. Something about health your physician insists. You eat 3 bites. The ambassador is still talking. Opposite you, the Archbishop drops a small piece of bread. It vanishes beneath the table. He does not retrieve it. This will bother you all evening. Historians still argue whether you truly enjoyed these dinners or merely tolerated them for the sake of optics. In truth, the spectacle is necessary, but the food, the talk, it's seasoning without substance. You would much rather be alone, with your fan and a small biscuit. Another course. Game of some sort. You don't ask. The sauce is thick and attempts to taste like confidence. You let it sit untouched. You glance down the table. A cousin from Saxony is whispering something scandalous to a marchioness. You note it, but won't act. Not tonight. Let the gossips have their feast. You'll get the details later, filtered through 5 retellings and 3 exaggerations. Conversation shifts. Someone mentions electric lights. You resist the urge to roll your eyes. Yes, you've installed them in certain parts of the palace. No, you don't trust them entirely. They flicker, they hum, they're too enthusiastic. Candlelight, at least, knows how to behave. You say none of this aloud. Instead, you offer, progress has its merits and its consequences. That shuts them up for a moment. Dessert arrives. It's something custardy with shaved almonds and ambition. You take a single spoonful. It's fine. The meal winds down. People begin to breathe again, as though the weight of proximity to royalty has finally loosened its grip. You rise. Everyone follows. There is a brief farewells, a bow here, a curtsy there. The ambassador insists on a final word about tariffs. You nod like a parent indulging a child's drawing of a dragon. Fascinating, you say. You turn to go. Back through the golden corridors, back past the mirrors and marble and muffled echoes. You reach your private sitting room. The door closes behind you. Silence. You exhale for the first time in what feels like hours. Sir Pippington has already claimed his pillow. He snores like an aristocrat with sinus issues. You remove your fan, your necklace. You begin to unfasten the 1,000 hidden hooks that keep a queen dressed as a queen. And somewhere behind it all, under the layers of silk, lace, and legacy, there you are, just a woman, one who happens to wear history like a corset.
Now that you're back in your private sitting room, the hush feels almost sacred. No one rushes in, no one asks anything. The room is soft lit, fragrant with lavender water and the faint wax of freshly extinguished tapers. It smells like the end of the day. You sit, but not in your grand throne-like chair, not tonight. Instead, you ease into the old green velvet one by the fire. It sighs beneath you, just a little. You've sat in this chair so many times, it knows the shape of your thoughts. A maid begins undoing your gown. You hold up one hand, a signal, not yet. Because first, there's still the matter of correspondence. The red leather dispatch box waits on the side table. Of course it does. It always does. You stare at it for a moment, as if you might will it shut by sheer royal defiance. It remains open, bulging in fact, a stubborn tin of empire. You lift the lid. Letters, reports, memoranda, notes from ministers with names that are all whiskers and politics. One from Disraeli, no doubt. He always writes with a kind of poetic swagger, as if he's trying to seduce the entire monarchy one metaphor at a time. You pick up his letter first. He's just returned from a parliamentary session and uses phrases like the fate of the Orient and as radiant as the crown itself. You smirk. He's such a drama cake, but smart, so very dangerously smart. You like him. Not because he flatters you, though he does that with stunning precision, but because he sees the mechanics. He knows the gears beneath the throne. You set it aside. Another letter, from Melbourne. Not the city, the man. Long gone now, of course, but you remember the early days, when he was your mentor, your almost father, your first real guide. It's not actually a letter from him, just a report from his once clerk, now someone's baronet, referencing one of his old policies. But reading his name is enough to conjure him. You remember his handwriting, slanted, soft, like he was never quite confident in the weight of his words. You read more. A note about unrest in Ireland, again. A diplomatic plea from Canada, something about French-speaking tensions and wheat subsidies. You skim it, add a discreet tick to the margin. The Governor-General can handle that one.
And then another. It's from one of your daughters, Louise, always the artist, always the dreamer. Her letter is less politics and more watercolor. Mama, the sky was this strange shade of apricot yesterday, and I thought of the curtains in Balmoral. You smile. It's a strange thing, to mother and rain at the same time. Sometimes they blend, sometimes they clash like poorly matched embroidery. You glance at the mantel clock. 9:30. The letters don't stop coming just because you grow weary. The empire doesn't sleep simply because your eyelids droop. You read 3 more. A request for medals, a naval promotion, a small uprising somewhere hot and far where the sun shines too brightly on other people's trouble. And then, finally, you close the box. The lid clicks shut with the same sound every night, like a punctuation mark. You stand. The maid returns, eyes lowered, and begins undoing the gown's 1,000 secret fasteners. It comes away like a skin too formal to keep. Your body breathes.
The corset unlaced, you exhale deeply, like the drawing back of a tide. They help you into your evening robe, deep navy, velvet, trimmed with fur that whispers against your skin. You're smaller without the gown, more believable. You move to your writing table again. Not for the journal. You've already penned the day's entry. No, this is for a letter you've been putting off. To your granddaughter, Alex, the one who married into the Russian court, a position that sparkles with danger. You worry for her, for the pressure, for the fragility of crowns that wobble more than they shine. You begin slowly. My dearest Alex. You tell her about the roses that bloomed late this year, about Sir Pippington's dislike of geese. You don't mention revolution. You don't mention whispers of unrest, but they linger in the margins, like smoke curling beneath a locked door. When you finish, you seal the envelope with wax, press your signet ring into it, a small act of power that now feels more ceremonial than secure. You stand once more. The bed is turned down, pillows fluffed with military precision, sheets warmed by copper pans that were whisked away before you arrived. You move toward it like a ship returning to harbor, slow, inevitable, bone-tired. But before you slide beneath the covers, you do one last thing. You open the bedside drawer. Inside, a photograph of Albert. Still young, still earnest. You stare at it for a long moment. You don't cry anymore. That phase has passed. Now, it's more like aching around an old scar, the kind of pain that doesn't scream, just hums. Historians still argue whether your mourning was exaggerated, political, or simply Victorian theater. But they weren't here, in the quiet of this room, when you whispered into a pillow, because there was no longer a shoulder. You close the drawer, lie down. The mattress holds you like a promise. The bed is enormous, but you sleep curled, compact, like a girl tucked against history. A maid tiptoes in to snuff the final candle. She does it gently, like one might hush a child's nightmare. Darkness fills the room. Almost, because across the chamber, a single lamp remains. Just one, low, soft. A glow that says, the Queen is never fully asleep. And you aren't, not yet. Because just then, there's a knock. You sigh, not startled, just royal. The door opens slightly. A servant appears, bowing. A telegram from India, Your Majesty. Of course there is. You take it. Unfold it. Your eyes scan the narrow lines. Words about a ceremony. A local ruler who refuses to bow. A political faux pas disguised as a misunderstanding. You fold the paper. Place it on the nightstand. You'll deal with it tomorrow. Right now,
Finally, you close your eyes. The castle exhales with you. Somewhere down the hall, the clock begins to chime 10, slowly, softly, the kind of sound that could lull even a monarch into dreams. But not just yet, because just then there's a knock. You sigh, not startled, just royal. The door opens slightly. A servant appears, bowing. "A telegram from India, Your Majesty." "Of course there is." You take it, unfold it. Your eyes scan the narrow lines. Words about a ceremony. A local ruler who refuses to bow. A political faux pas disguised as a misunderstanding. You fold the paper. Place it on the nightstand. You'll deal with it tomorrow. Right now, finally, you close your eyes. The castle exhales with you. Somewhere down the hall, the clock begins to chime 10, slowly, softly, the kind of sound that could lull even a monarch into dreams. But not just yet, because even in sleep, you're still the queen.
The dreams come strangely tonight. They don't follow the usual loops of past summers at Balmoral or Albert's hand in yours beside a frost-covered window. No, this time it's something half dream, half memory. You standing in a drawing room with 7 different sovereigns, none of whom speak, yet all of whom are nodding like marionettes on strings pulled by fate. And in the corner, Disraeli feeding a peacock scone crumbs. You shift in your sleep. When morning finally comes, it does not arrive with fanfare, but with the measured light of a London day politely leaking around velvet drapes. There's already movement in the halls, soft-soled footsteps, coal being shoveled into hearths, silver being polished somewhere out of sight. The maid enters with the grace of someone who knows not to speak. She opens the curtains halfway, just enough to remind you that time is moving. You groan, quietly. But it's not just the usual morning rust. Your back feels like it was used as a battleground between 2 mattresses, one too soft, one too traitorous. You make a mental note to mention this to someone, not that it will help. Eventually, you rise. And here we go again. The ritual of being Queen Victoria doesn't take days off. You're helped into your wrapper. Warm water is brought in, a silver basin, rose soap. You wash your face as if removing the previous day's diplomacy, one careful splash at a time. And then, breakfast. Except not yet. First, more letters. The red box is back. Different notes now, but just as pressing, or pretending to be. One concerns a scandal involving a cousin in Vienna and a misplaced hatpin that allegedly caused political embarrassment. You blink at the phrase. You suppose anything can be political if one squints hard enough. Another memo is about trains. Always trains, the iron veins of the empire, stretching and hissing and demanding more funds. You consider how strange it is to have been born before the world ran on steam, before metal replaced horses, before telegraphs sang across oceans. Historians still debate whether you were truly progressive in private or merely tolerant in public. Did you embrace the modern world or merely ride it like a reluctant passenger clinging to the railing? You'd say both. You turn your attention back to the page. One note is from your son Arthur overseas. He writes too formally. You wish he'd mentioned something other than inspections and troop morale. Does he eat well? Is he ever lonely? You don't ask, you just imagine. Breakfast finally arrives. The same porcelain set, the same eggs, the same tea. Strong with 1 sugar. You eat as you read, your movements efficient, almost automatic. Until, there it is. A newspaper clipping, folded inside a note from your private secretary.
It's from an American paper, something called the New York Herald. The headline reads, "The Queen's Day, is it all just tea and telegrams?" You raise an eyebrow. Of course it is. But also, it isn't. The article goes on to describe your daily life in mildly mocking tones. Too much ceremony, too little excitement. The author seems disappointed that you don't go galloping through Hyde Park or host wild dinners in jewels and scandal. You finish reading. Set the paper down.
A small part of you wants to laugh. Another part wants to write a furious reply. But mostly, you feel tired in that peculiar way that comes from being misunderstood. You sip your tea. Then the hairdresser arrives. She's here to do the public style today. Tight bun, center parted, stern but regal. The version of you that appears on coins. You hold still as she works. The pins click into place like a typewriter keying out your status. Once she's gone, you dress again. Not for dinner this time, but for an outing, a brief one, a hospital visit. You don't often leave the palace without ceremony, but today calls for something quieter. There's a new children's wing being opened. Your presence has been requested. The kind of small gesture that becomes the highlight of someone else's month. You agree, because such small gestures are sometimes the only ones that still feel real. The carriage is brought around. You descend the steps slowly. The day is gray. Of course it is. You've long made peace with London's refusal to sparkle unless absolutely necessary. Inside the carriage, you wrap a shawl around your knees. A curious thing happens when the public sees you like this, not in coronation robes or from a balcony, but passing by behind glass. They go very still. Children nudge each other. Men remove hats. Women whisper things like, "There she is." You wonder what they see. A queen? A symbol? A woman with tired eyes and a blanket over her lap. You arrive. The hospital staff are gathered out front. There's bunting, small, colorful, homemade. You like that. You step out, supported gently, and are greeted with curtsies and bows. The matron nervously introduces the children. They've all been practicing how to stand. One drops his paper crown. You bend slightly to help him retrieve it. A gasp goes through the staff. You smile at the boy. "Better keep that on," you say gently, "or someone might try to make you prime minister." They laugh. The tension eases. Inside, the air is warm and smells like disinfectant and biscuits. You walk through the halls, nodding at nurses. They beam as though royalty might cure sciatica. You ask questions about funding, about medicine, about the number of beds. And then you pause before a girl. She can't be more than 8. She's missing a leg. A crutch leans against her chair. But her eyes are clear, direct. She meets your gaze without fear. It almost startles you. "What's your name?" you ask. "Lydia," she replies. "I drew you." She holds up a sketch. It's you. Not in full regalia, just you. Wrapped in your shawl, hair in a bun, holding a teacup. You blink. It is strangely accurate. You thank her, take the drawing, fold it gently. Later, when you're back in the carriage, you unfold it again. Look at it for a long time. You decide to keep it in your drawer, just behind Albert's photo. You return to the palace. The same ritual plays out. Gloves removed, letters reviewed, another round of briefings, another update on India, more lines on a map moving with the urgency of men who've never been there. And then you sit, still in your coat, still holding Lydia's sketch, and for once you allow yourself to do nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Because sometimes being Queen Victoria isn't about tea or titles or telegrams. Sometimes it's about a face a child can draw, a presence in a room where people need to feel like the world is still in order. You finally set the drawing aside. Then, slowly, you rise and ring the bell. Tea, you say simply. Because, yes, sometimes that's the only thing that does make sense.
You're back in your rooms now. It's late afternoon, the light coming through the high windows with a softness that only London knows, faintly yellow, dust-swirled, and pretending not to be fog. The kind of light that lingers like a polite guest waiting for you to finish your tea before making its quiet exit. You're seated at your writing desk again, the same stack of heavy stationery, royal crest pressed into each page as if to remind the paper to behave. It's where most of your empire is managed, not in throne rooms, but here, in the gentle hush between spoonfuls of preserved pear and the scratch of a fountain pen. Today's letters are particularly dense. Colonial affairs. You try not to sigh too loudly. There's a dispatch from South Africa, something about infrastructure near the Cape, and trouble with Boers again. Of course there is. They're always offended by something. You wonder briefly what would happen if you just stopped writing back. Let them stew in their sulk. Another note mentions a survey mission deep in the Sudanese desert. You trace the place name with your finger, Khartoum. The way it curves on the page makes it feel like a mirage. You've never been there, obviously, but your name is being spoken in those dry places, painted onto signs, written into treaties, sewn onto military banners that flap against sun-bleached tents. Historians still debate whether you understood the full reach of your empire or merely signed off on it one polite folder at a time. It's a fair question, because you've never seen the sunset over the Himalayas. You've never walked the red earth of Australia or heard Hindi shouted in the backstreets of Bombay. But you've read the letters, and sometimes that's almost worse, because they describe these places with such clipped precision. Revolts, famines, railways, mines. Never the smell of spices or the laughter of street vendors. Never the ache of homesickness carved into the voice of a young soldier posted far too far from home. You pause, set your pen down, and then do something you don't often do. You open your diary, not for the public record, but your private one, the one with the soft blue cover, the one that no one else reads. You begin to write. I wonder if they think I am ever afraid. Just that. You leave it at that. A maid taps gently. It's time. You're expected at a private audience with your eldest son, Bertie, the future king. You don't rise immediately. That meeting can wait a moment longer. Because this moment, this flicker of silence, is yours. But only briefly. Eventually, you do go. He's waiting in the red room. He always arrives early when he wants something, late when he doesn't. Today, he's precisely on time, which means the conversation will be slippery. Mother, he greets. You nod.
He begins at once. Talk of trade agreements, of alliances with Prussia, of marriages and dukes, and someone's indecent behavior at a recent ball. You let him speak. You watch him. He's grown into his waistcoat finally. Less of a disappointment these days. Still a disappointment, of course, but one with charm. You should rest more, he says at one point. You blink. Then smirk. Should I abdicate while I'm at it? He winces, half laughs. You've always known how to pinch him with silk-gloved fingers. You speak for a while longer. The kind of conversation that skips across the surface like a pebble. Politics, weather, grandchild updates. But beneath it, there's always that unspoken current, the future. He will be king. Someday. But not yet. When you part, you clasp his hand longer than necessary. You'll remember everything I taught you? He nods. You squeeze. You'd better. Back in your rooms, you feel the weight of that exchange settle into your shoulders like a heavy shawl. Being a monarch means you are always teaching, whether your student wants to learn or not. You sit again. Another hour, another tea tray. The biscuits this time are shortbread, and you nibble without tasting. Your mind drifts. To India. To the title you insisted upon, Empress of India. You remember the debates, the wrangling, the public criticism. Why did she need that title? Wasn't Queen enough? Did she even know what India was? Historians still argue whether you craved the title for personal vanity or symbolic unity. You'd say both. But also because the word empress gave you a kind of gravity in a world increasingly built on smoke and telegram wires. It was a declaration, a refusal to shrink as the world grew louder. You remember the day the title was formalized. How Disraeli knelt, yes, knelt, and presented it like a jewel on a velvet pillow. You remember his words. The Empress of India is not just a name, ma'am, it is a vision. You'd liked that. You told him so. Of course, not everyone agreed. Your advisors muttered, the newspapers snickered. But you knew, deep down, that power is also performance. The crown is not just a hat, it's a message. You reach for a small framed portrait on your side table. It's not Albert this time. It's one of your Indian attendants, Abdul Karim. His gaze is calm, his turban perfectly wound, his expression almost unreadable. He's younger than your children, almost a servant, but not quite. A bridge to a world most of your court only understands in maps and myths. You remember how they reacted when you brought him into your confidence. How the aristocracy bristled, whiskered, rebelled without rebelling. But you didn't care, because Abdul read poetry with you, translated Urdu phrases that melted into your tired ears like lullabies. He reminded you that empires are made of people, not just flags and territories and treaties. You keep his portrait beside Albert's. The two men who made you feel most human, one from Germany, one from India. Neither belonged in your court. Both found their way into your heart anyway. Outside, the light is dimming again. Another day, wrapped in lace and protocol, has slipped through your fingers. You rise once more. Move to the mirror. You study yourself. Not as the newspapers see you, not as the coins depict you. Just you. The lines around your eyes like folded parchment. The curl of your lips, unpainted and dry. The hair, white now, but still stubborn in places. You don't smile, but you don't frown either. You just look, and you nod, as if to say, yes, this is what ruling for 60 years looks like. This is what surviving every storm, every loss, every whisper behind the curtain looks like. You turn away. The light catches your gown, your slippers, your step, and once again you vanish into the hush of your private rooms, already rehearsing tomorrow's grace before today is even done.
Evening again. The air has taken on that curious, still quality where everything feels like it's holding its breath. The palace is quieter now, not silent, no, that would be unnerving, but cushioned in a sort of practiced hush. Servants moving more lightly, lamps burning lower, conversations behind doors growing shorter, softer, more forgettable.
You are not asleep yet. Of course not. You rarely sleep before midnight these days. Your body doesn't trust it. Too many years of monarch's hours. Too many crises that arrived just as you were settling into your nightgown. So you sit instead. In the soft armchair near the fireplace, hands resting on the embroidery you've been meaning to finish for weeks. The same rose pattern you've stitched 1,000 times. You know every petal by muscle memory, every thread color by name. And yet you still manage to prick your finger at least once every 2 evenings. You've begun to suspect the needle has its own sense of humor. A tray has been brought in, your final tea of the day. Chamomile, no milk, 1 slice of seed cake, though you rarely touch it. You sip slowly, not because you're savoring it, but because it gives your hands something gentle to do, while your mind continues its relentless trot through the day's wait. Tonight, that wait is Algeria. Yes, a report came in this afternoon. French activity near the Sahara. A stirring of tensions you'd rather not revisit. Another skirmish between empires. Another ripple in the carefully ironed map of European diplomacy. You think about writing to the French ambassador, but what would you even say? Please don't colonize too enthusiastically. We're still digesting ours. Instead, you sigh and look down at your embroidery. 1 stitch, then another. Your mind drifts to science. Yes, oddly enough, science. You think about the invention of the telephone, how the first time you used it, the voice on the other end sounded like it was whispering through a tin trumpet submerged in bathwater. And yet, miraculous. You had stood there, holding a device no bigger than a small loaf of bread, and heard someone speak to you from another room. Historians still argue whether you truly understood the scale of what the telephone would become, or whether you just thought it a passing curiosity, like those dreadful early motor cars. You had called them noisy wheel demons, at least once, in writing. Still, you allowed one to be demonstrated in your presence, just once. You remember the first electric light installed in the palace, the flicker, the faint hum, the way your staff flinched slightly whenever it buzzed to life. You yourself preferred candlelight, less aggressive, more honest. But even you couldn't deny, the world was racing ahead, and you were being dragged behind it like a very well-dressed kite. Electricity, trains, photography, X-rays, steamships, all within your reign. When you were born, people still believed in phrenology, and now here you sit, sipping herbal tea under gaslight, reading telegrams sent across oceans in seconds. And somehow, despite all that, you are still here, still stitching roses.
Your thoughts are interrupted by the soft rustle of a book being brought in. Your lady-in-waiting enters quietly and offers a novel for the evening. Tonight's choice, The Woman in White. You raise an eyebrow. Wilkie Collins again? You murmur. She shrugs with a faint smile. You seemed to enjoy it last week, ma'am. You nod. You did. Something about the atmosphere, the secrets in moonlight, the quiet dread between paragraphs. You allow her to read aloud. And she does, in a calm, even tone that barely rises above the crackling fire. The story glides along. A woman in distress, a man in pursuit. The typical Victorian intrigue, all fog and footmen and someone fainting just out of frame. But even as the words reach you, your thoughts wander again. You think about those who have come and gone. Prime ministers, 7 of them so far. Some fawned, some fought, all bowed. Disraeli with his perfume and compliments. Gladstone with his lectures that felt like sermons trapped inside a dictionary. Family, too. You feel Albert's absence tonight
in a way that pinches. Sometimes it's a gentle ache, like old lace being pulled from a drawer. Tonight, it's sharper. You wish he were here to listen to the story with you, to raise an eyebrow at the plot twist, to rest his hand on yours, absent-mindedly, the way he used to when he wasn't even thinking about it. There's something unkind about being the one who remembers everything. You close your eyes. The reading continues. The fire pops once, like a punctuation mark. Your thoughts flicker again, this time to the crystal. Yes, that crystal. The one on the chain beneath your gown. The one given to you by a medium who claimed it would allow communication with the other side. You wore it for weeks after Albert's death, desperately hoping for a sign, a whisper, a flicker of candlelight that couldn't be explained. You were not the only Victorian to fall into that hopeful fog. Spiritualism was everywhere. Seances in drawing rooms, Ouija boards sold next to fine china. Even Arthur Conan Doyle, your knighted Doyle, believed in fairies caught on camera. Historians still puzzle over your fascination with the occult. Was it grief, desperation, or simply a fashionable madness shared by everyone in black silk? You'd say it doesn't matter, because when you lose someone who built your soul, you start looking for them in wallpaper patterns and tea leaves. You bend the rules of logic just to hear their name whispered by candlelight. And in those quiet evenings, when the palace halls felt emptier than tombs, even nonsense could feel like prayer. The reading has stopped. You open your eyes again. Your lady-in-waiting smiles gently. You hadn't even noticed the chapter ended. Shall I continue? You shake your head. No, that's enough for tonight. She nods, rises, and leaves you with a soft curtsy. Now it's just you again. You turn toward the window. The sky is a bruise-colored velvet now, stars hidden behind clouds that drift like thoughts too heavy to settle. And there, in the glass, you see your reflection, faint, flickering, like a ghost of yourself. You tilt your head. Try to see what others see. The widow, the ruler, the empress, the stubborn old woman who still demands tea at precisely the same hour and writes her own speech notes in a handwriting that defies modern ink. But what do you see? You see someone tired, but not done. You see someone soft, wrapped in shawls and regret, but still sharp where it counts. You see the longest reigning monarch the British Isles have ever known, and still, you're just Victoria, not the Queen, not the symbol, just Victoria. You rise. The fire is low now. You ring for the maid. The covers have already been turned down, the sheets warmed with hot bricks. Your nightgown, ironed and lavender-scented, waits folded on the chair. You change slowly. The years make every motion deliberate, a sleeve, a button, a sigh, and then into bed, not because you are sleepy, but because the day has ended and the Queen is expected to rest. And so you will rest. Even if your mind still lingers somewhere between the Sahara, a seance, and the last words of tonight's ghost story. You reach for the bell once more. Tea, you whisper. Because even now, especially now, that's the only thing that still makes perfect, infallible, imperial sense. You wake before the bell. It's still dark, early enough that the gas lights in the hallway haven't yet been extinguished, casting their thin glow across the carpet like trails left by forgotten dreams. The palace is still asleep, or at least pretending to be. But your eyes open on their own, the way they always have, as though somewhere in your bones a little brass pocket watch is ticking along with stubborn royal precision. You don't ring immediately. Instead, you lie still, eyes adjusting to the soft ceiling shadows above your bed canopy. There's a chill in the room, the kind that seems to drift up from the stones themselves, curling around your ankles despite the heavy blankets. This is the moment you most often remember him. Not with words, not even with images, just with that unbearable sense of absence that presses against your ribs the moment you stop moving. You finally sit up. The dressing maid arrives without needing to be summoned. She's been trained to do this, just as her predecessor was, and her predecessor before that. Generations of women rising at strange hours to help their queen into slippers and woolen wraps. You say little, she says even less. But when she buttons the last pearl clasp at your collar, you catch her eye in the mirror. "Bad dreams, ma'am?" You hesitate, then simply say, "No dreams at all. That's worse." And that's enough. She leaves you to your chair and the first cup of tea. Not the grand tea, just the early one, the whisper before dawn one. You sip, and begin the slow, familiar mental turning of the royal gears. There's something faintly comforting about this rhythm. You know today's schedule, you always know it. Letters, audiences, the bishop around noon, the children later, perhaps a short walk if the weather permits, and always that mountainous stack of paperwork waiting in your study like a disapproving schoolmaster with ink-stained fingers. You glance down at your lap. A document sits there already. Someone must have slipped it in with the morning dispatch. It's from a society you only half remember endorsing. Something to do with exploration and anthropology. The language is dreadfully pompous. The phrases float like a balloon that can't find its ceiling. They found something. Ruins. In Mesopotamia, or what was Mesopotamia, you have to remind yourself of the new names. The empire is always renaming things. The letter claims that a team of British-funded scholars has uncovered stone tablets, inscriptions older than Rome, older even than the pyramids. They want permission to publish, funding for a second expedition. You let the paper fall to your lap and whisper aloud to the empty room, "Of course they found something." It always strikes you how humans keep digging into the past when they don't know what to do with the present. Historians still argue whether your endorsement of imperial archaeology was a matter of genuine intellectual curiosity or just another form of cultural conquest. You'd say probably both. Because when you rule over nearly a quarter of the globe, every action is both curiosity and conquest. Every funded dig is a crown-shaped fingerprint left in foreign soil. You finish your tea and let the maid dress you more formally. And by the time you arrive in your private office, the sun has breached the horizon. That thin English gold light that makes everything a little more bearable. You sit at your writing desk, and you write.
It's the same script as yesterday. Cordial phrases, assertive margins, questions about tariffs and ship routes, and the moral integrity of colonial governors. But there's one letter you pause over. It's addressed to a young schoolgirl in Leeds who wrote to you about her exams. Her handwriting was wonky, her grammar barely hanging together, but at the end she wrote, "My teacher says you work harder than anyone, even the Prime Minister. Is that true?" You smile, faintly. Then pick up your pen. "Tell your teacher I said thank you, and tell him that Prime Ministers retire, Queens do not." You seal the envelope yourself, and for a moment, just a moment, you feel something like peace. Later, after another round of meetings, you are invited to view a new portrait. This happens more often than you'd prefer. You always dread it. Being painted feels like being preserved in syrup. But the artist, some young fellow from Oxford, has tried something different. Less pomp, more presence.
You're seated, of course, they always seat you these days, but your posture is not stiff. Your eyes are focused, not vague. There's a shawl thrown casually around your shoulders. You stare at the painting. The artist looks nervous. You say nothing. Then, gently, you nod. "It's not flattering," you murmur. He begins to panic, stammering apologies. You hold up a hand. "That's why it's good." He exhales like someone saved from execution. Because here's the truth, you've been flattered enough, immortalized enough, stamped onto enough coins, busts, cameos, brooches, book plates, and biscuit tins. But this painted tiredness, this version of you with shadows under your eyes and a slightly unbuttoned sleeve, that's the you only a few have ever met, and it feels oddly generous to let others see it now. You move through the rest of the day on legs that feel more borrowed than owned. Evening creeps in again. You dine alone as usual. A servant brings in a tray with roast pheasant, potatoes, something green and unconvincing. You pick at it, not from lack of hunger, but from the knowledge that nothing ever quite tastes right anymore. When they clear the dishes, you request, again, your evening tea. Different blend this time. Rose hips and lavender. Because you feel tender tonight. Tender in that strange way that isn't pain exactly, but something near it. The ache that comes not from the wound, but from the scar. You take the tea to the window and look out over the palace gardens. They're dim now, the pathways lit only by faint lanterns and the memory of moonlight. You wonder how many footsteps you've left out there, how many walks taken with Albert, how many conversations held behind hedges, away from ears and duty and endless watching eyes. You used to believe your gardens were private. You know better now. There is no privacy when one is sovereign. There is only illusion and whatever soft corner you can manage for yourself before the bell rings again. And yet, here you are, tea in hand, wrapped in shawls and dusk, still breathing, still bearing the title, still capable of lifting a pen and writing in that firm imperial hand, "Approved." You return to your room and change slowly again. Another maid, another nightgown. You wear lace even in sleep because appearances are a habit now, not a choice. You lie back, but you don't close your eyes, not yet. Instead, you turn your head toward the bedside table. There, beside your favorite diary, rests the small photograph. It's of your great-grandchildren. Tiny, ridiculous creatures, all curls and wide eyes and uncertain posture. Their names already bear titles heavier than their bodies. You smile, but it is a strange smile, one part warmth, two parts warning. Because the wheel turns, and eventually they too will wake at ungodly hours. They too will be fitted into morning gowns and married off in service of geography. They too will read letters describing places they will never see, and sign their names beneath decisions that will ripple through generations. And if they are lucky, they will also learn to laugh at the absurdity of it all. You turn out the light, and in the darkness, you murmur a single phrase into the silence. Let them remember the tea. Because in the end, that's what your life has been. Not the wars, not the treaties, not even the empires, but the tea. Poured faithfully, served politely, drunk stubbornly. Even when the world burned, even when your heart broke, even now. Morning again. The world turns, and it's back to the rhythm, as inevitable as the ticking of the palace clocks, each minute portioned and polished like your silver tea service. You wake before the maid even arrives, eyes open in darkness once more, but you're not surprised. Sleep grows lighter as the years grow heavier. Outside, birds are trying to remember how to sing in the London fog. Inside, you stretch your legs slowly beneath the covers, joints whispering their usual morning protests. But you rise anyway. Of course you do. You always do. Because if there is one truth you've taught the Empire, it's this: the Queen shows up. Today's schedule isn't unusual, and that's saying something, since your definition of usual includes audiences with foreign dignitaries, correspondence with half a dozen viceroys, and the delicate maneuvering required to avoid a diplomatic incident over the seating arrangements at a state dinner. But for now, tea. You breathe in the first cup like it's air from a saner time. Outside your chamber window, you can just make out the tips of the trees in the palace garden, some still bent from last night's wind. The same wind that might have once tangled your hair when you were just a girl in Kensington, before all the titles and iron corsets and funeral processions, when your biggest worry was whether Lezen would let you read past midnight. You shake the memory off like a thin coat. Too early for nostalgia. That comes later. First, correspondence. You settle into your writing chair. The cushion beneath you, worn in all the right ways, sighs like an old friend. Your inkwell glints in the lamplight. The first few envelopes are predictable. Ministers rambling, charities begging, more questions about which orphanage deserves the next royal nod. You glide through them. Then you reach something different. A letter from one of your children. You sigh. Not out of annoyance, never that, but from a tired love that has stretched over decades and dynasties. You unfold the paper and see the familiar handwriting. Louise. She's been painting again, and sculpting. There's a description of a new bust she's working on, a female figure, strong-browed and serene. It's modeled after you, apparently, or how she imagines you must have looked when you were young and ruling alone. You smile faintly. Historians still argue whether Louise ever really understood you, or whether any of your children truly did. But this letter is gentle. She writes of stone and shadow, of how chiseling your likeness feels like a prayer with a hammer. And at the bottom, she scrolled, "You were beautiful once. You are beautiful still." You fold it neatly and tuck it into a drawer with the others. They'll say you were cold. Let them say it. They don't know how often you read these letters in the quiet hours, how long you stare at their handwriting, your fingers tracing loops and swirls across the page like they're maps of lost affection. You glance at the clock. Almost time. Today is one of those curious rituals the court likes to perform now and then, a royal luncheon with the rising members of Parliament. You dread these a little, not because of the politics, they're easy enough to predict, but because of the youth. All that enthusiasm, all that untested cleverness. It's like watching fireflies try to light up a ballroom. You dress accordingly. Not full mourning, but something somber. You don't want to appear frivolous. Let them see the weight of the crown in every hem and cufflink. The dining room is already buzzing when you enter. They all rise, of course. You move through the space like a ship through fog, slow, unbothered, quietly intimidating. They glance at you like students caught passing notes, and you take your place at the head of the table. Then the tea arrives. You make a show of pouring it yourself, carefully, precisely. There is an art to this, a quiet sort of pageantry. You watch the room shift as they realize they're being studied, not as politicians, not as men, but as tea drinkers. Do they slurp? Do they stir before sipping? Do they sweeten? You file it all away. One of the younger MPs tries to make conversation, something about the modern role of the monarchy.
You let him speak. His enthusiasm is as endearing as it is exhausting.
Finally, you interject. In the time it took you to outline your argument, you murmur, I drank half my tea, and the empire continued turning. Remarkable, isn't it? There's a nervous chuckle. You don't smile. Because the truth is, they don't need your approval. Not really. They need your presence, your endurance, your stillness. You are the axis. They are the weather. And you've learned over these long ceremonial decades that stillness is more powerful than noise. The luncheon ends. You walk back to your study alone. Along the way, you pause by a window. Outside, the light has changed. You catch a glimpse of the royal stables. A groom is brushing one of the horses. The animal's flank gleams, muscles twitching under its hide like poetry in motion. You loved horses once. Still do, in fact. Back in Windsor, there's a little mare who knows your step. You visit her when you can, let her nuzzle your gloves and whinny softly into your shoulder. You've whispered more truths to that creature than to most ministers. You keep walking. There's an envelope on your desk that wasn't there before. It's not official, no seal, just a simple folded piece of stationery. You open it. A poem, unsigned, written in an elegant hand but unfamiliar. The lines are brief, sad, haunting. We crowned her with clocks, and she bore them with grace. She drank from a porcelain cup every day. She was not the war, but its face. She was not the sun, but the tray. You close it slowly and say nothing. Somewhere in the back of your mind, you make a note to ask the footman where it came from, but only after tea. Because that's the next item. Another blend, something herbal this time, your doctor's idea. You sip it in silence, letting the warm steam brush your cheeks like ghost fingers. You've outlived almost everyone now. Your husband, your mother. So many of your ministers that you once joked the Privy Council might need to hold its meetings in a graveyard. Even John Brown. Yes, even him. Historians still argue whether he was your confidant, your servant, your shadow, or something more scandalous. You've never confirmed it, and you won't. Because some truths are not for books, they're for tea. As the light fades, you begin reviewing the day's final papers. A new bill, some colonial petition, a proposed hospital in Edinburgh to be named after you. You nod faintly, sign without hesitation. Your wrist aches, but the motion is second nature now. And then, a strange little package. No letter, just a box. You open it cautiously. Inside, a tea strainer. Simple, worn, clearly used. And underneath it, a note in shaky hand. Used this in your service for 23 years. Thought you'd want it back. God save the Queen. No name. Just a ghost from the pantry, it seems. You hold it for a long moment. Then smile. A real one. You place it beside the poem and close your eyes briefly. Then the bell rings for supper, and the ritual resumes. The evening air inside the palace smells faintly of coal fire and lavender polish. It's dinner now, formal, of course, but less so than the grand banquets of your younger reign. At this stage, nobody expects you to sit through 7 courses and polite laughter about pheasant again. Instead, you dine quietly with a few trusted faces, an equerry, a lady-in-waiting, sometimes one of your daughters, if they happen to be in town and not feuding. Tonight, it's just you and the soft chime of silver on porcelain. You barely touch your food.
Not because you've lost your appetite, though that's true, but because the act of chewing has become ceremonial, a performance like everything else. You lift your fork, you pause mid-bite, you ask someone a question they're too timid to answer, and then you set it all down again. Your presence at the table is the meal. Everyone else just eats around it. You sip your tea, still hot, still floral, always present. Once you dreamed of writing a book called The Empress and Her Infusions, but the idea vanished like steam sometime around your 73rd birthday. A pity. It might have been your most honest work. The dinner ends and you retreat to the sitting room, to silence. You move slowly now, less because of age than out of habit. Each step measured, each glance weighted. Even in private, you wear the crown in your spine. The fire's already lit. You ease into your favorite chair and let the heat crawl up your legs. Somewhere behind you, the faint clatter of dishes being cleared sounds like applause from another life. And then, as it often does at this hour, memory returns. Not a flood, just a gentle leak. You think of the time Albert built that hideous contraption to time how long it took your tea to cool. The Victoria Infusion Thermometer. You called it a brass-faced insult, but secretly you found it charming. It still sits in a drawer somewhere, broken but proud. You think of the time you scolded Bertie for drinking from your saucer. You are the future king, you told him, not a barn cat. He blinked and asked if cats could be royalty. You had no answer for that. You remember the time Disraeli tried to woo you with tea from India, Darjeeling, freshly harvested, and you pretended not to care, even though you drank 3 cups behind his back. Lovely bouquet, you muttered to a footman. Don't tell him. You remember. Historians still argue whether you ruled from the heart or only from the throne, whether your devotion to routine was strength or stubbornness, whether your legendary temper was inherited from your Hanoverian forebears or simply forged in grief. But they never mention how you always took your tea with just 1 sugar cube, never 2. They never write about the chipped cup you insisted on keeping, hidden behind all the finer china, because it reminded you of your mother's kitchen. They never note the way your hands tremble slightly now, even as you lift the spoon with perfect poise. But that's how memory works, isn't it? It picks strange things to carry. You glance over at the clock. Almost time. Your lady's maid enters without speaking. She knows the ritual. You rise. She helps you out of the heavier layers. Each garment, removed with care, feels like one less expectation draped across your shoulders, until you're just a woman in a robe, holding a cup of tea. You sit at your bedroom vanity. Brush your hair, still thick, though more silver than brown now. 48 strokes. No more, no less. You examine your reflection, and you see not the old queen, nor the grieving widow, nor the stern matriarch of 1,000 postage stamps. You see the same wary girl who once played with paper dolls and cried when her governess left. You press the teacup to your lips again. It's gone cold. No matter. You set it down, walk toward the bed. The covers are turned back. A hot water bottle tucked neatly beneath the sheets. You ease in. The silence here is its own lullaby. And in that soft, drifting place between thought and sleep, you remember something absurd. The time you tried to organize a tea-drinking ceremony with an elephant in India. He was remarkably well behaved. The Earl of Elgin considerably less so. You smile. And then a voice. Faint, real, from the hallway. It's your granddaughter, Alice's child, one of the German ones, laughing about something with a governess. You can't make out the words,
but the cadence is familiar. Youth, laughter, the future. It's still out there, apparently. The empire may crumble, the monarchy may wobble, but someone, somewhere, is still laughing. And that means something. Your eyes close. The bed is warm. And the world, for once, is quiet. You lie there now, with the weight of the day dissolving into darkness. The silks and sashes, the quills and telegrams, all slipping away like steam from a forgotten kettle. The world outside the palace hums on. Horses doze in their stalls, lanterns flicker. Somewhere, a diplomat frowns over a poorly translated telegram. But here, in this bed, there is only softness. Only the hush of cotton against skin. Only the deep rhythm of a body that has carried empires and grief and tea trays alike. Breathe in. The scent of lavender lingers faintly on the pillow. Breathe out. Let the memory of carriages and tiaras fade beneath the weight of heavier dreams. Tomorrow may bring more letters, more bows, more headlines bearing your name in ornate fonts. But tonight, you are simply Victoria, a woman beneath blankets, a soul between centuries, a heartbeat held gently in history's palm. Your limbs sink deeper now. The room grows still. The ticking clock on the mantel slows, or maybe you've just stopped noticing it. Let it tick. Let it count the seconds for you. There is nothing you need to do. No summons, no scrutiny, just rest. Perhaps, if dreams are kind, you'll find yourself back in the garden at Osborne, the sea breeze carrying laughter and the scent of roses. Or beside Albert again, in that narrow moment before waking, where he still reaches for your hand. Where nothing is heavy, where everything is warm, and the tea is always just right. Sleep well, little empress of order and time. You've done enough. Let the world take care of itself for once. Close your eyes. You're home.